Today we're going to look at how we can execute a takedown animation when the player approaches from behind and presses the X key. The key with this type of animation is that you do require two paired animations and then a means of getting your player into the correct position in order to execute the synchronized sequences. As long as you can do that, you can create a convincing effect. And then you can add sort of camera animation to it, and so forth. In this video we'll create this takedown mechanic, add a camera animation sequence with some post-processing effects. If you do like the video, please hit the like button and subscribe. The animations that we're going to use today are these two paired animations which are playing. So it's the paired sneak, neck break and neck break victim. I've got these animations from Fab, from this Ramster Free Anims Volume animation pack. I've also downloaded some animations from the Lyra starter pack, so both of these are free if anyone wants to follow along. From the Lyra starter pack, I've essentially got the crouch idle and the crouch walk, the unarmed versions of both of those, as we'll probably need them in this tutorial. So as you can see, in order for these animations to work, the attacker has to get into the right position at the right time so that the two animations will be synchronized with each other. And that's the first issue with this takedown. We need to get our player character into the perfect position, otherwise this animation will simply not work. In a previous video we looked at how we could move a character into the perfect position in order to enter a key code animation into a console. And in this case we used a simple AI move to approach. We could use the same approach again this time, but as we are all about 3 different ways of doing things, we're going to find a different approach. So the technique that we're going to use today to move our character into the precise position is this motion warping technique. And the way that motion warping works is that it uses the root motion of an animation to align it to a target location, thereby getting it in the correct location with the correct rotation at the correct time. So the first thing you'll need to do is go to your plugins and activate the motion warping plugin. It says it's a beta version, but we will use it. Press yes, and then you'll have to restart. Now that the plugin is activated, we can start. So we're going to need 2 characters. One will need a victim who is being choked, and one will need a sneak character who's doing the choking. And the position of the victim will define where the sneak character has to move to execute this takedown animation. So if we begin by creating a victim, so it'll be a character, BP victim. We can open that, and first of all we'll need a mesh, so we'll just choose the mannequin that comes with that Ramster anim pack, and we can just give him the Manny blueprint. So this will be his default position, and from here we need to calculate where the attack position should start. So let's just add another mesh here. And we can add the same mannequin. And move it back. And we should play the animation, so we can say it's animation asset, and we want the break attack. So if we just pause it somewhere here, we can advance it, say 1 second, move him back, and then just adjust so that he's in the correct position. So you can take your time positioning the attacking character so that the animations seem perfectly aligned. Basically, the easiest way of doing that is on both of the characters, choose an animation asset, choose the attacker on one, the victim on the other, and then turn off the playing and just change this initial position so that you can see where the arms and position should be aligned. So that seems close enough for us. The numbers that I've ended up with are, for the attacking character, are these numbers here. So these numbers on the location are the ones that I've ended up with, so you can play about with that. I think once we've done that, we can go back and put the blueprint here again, ABP Mani, and on the skeletal mesh we can just turn off the animations. So now we know where the attacking character needs to move to. We can change this maybe to a scene component. From the attacking mesh, we can copy the location, and on the scene we can paste it. The rotation we want to be 0. So even though this is at -90 degrees, that's the mesh, but the actual actor, we'll want him to be rotated at 0 in this transform. So we can change the name of this. This will be the attacking transform. And we can compile that. We can maybe just hide this now. So we don't need it. Now that we know where our player needs to warp to using motion warping, let's go and create a player character. So we'll take our third person, so this is a third person template. We'll grab this and just copy it to our tutorial folder. So that's the default third person character. We'll just rename that, call that our BP sneak character. I've created a game mode, so we can set that BP sneak character to be our default pawn. We open up the sneak character. On the mesh, so this is using SK Quinn. What I'm going to do is use the Mani from the Lyra starter pack, I think. And then I'm going to retarget our paired sneak attack animation to that Mani, because that's the one our sneak character will have to play. So that, if we look for our Mani again, so that looks as though they're playing fine. We can just export the animation, wait for that tutorial, and just say that's a retargeted animation. Keep all that as default. Close this. Now we've got the Mani retargeted animation. So motion warping needs root motion animations. It won't work otherwise. So if I open that retargeted animation, we'll need to turn on the enable root motion So now we can see sort of the movement of the root motion. So that red is basically the root motion, and it's on that movement there that the warping will happen. Now you can probably see the problem that we're going to have, in that if the motion warping is going to stretch this movement from here all the way to the end of the screen, there's not much for it to work with. So the animation is going to look rather slidey, because we don't have much of a movement of this root bone. It would be better if we had a longer animation, one where they are crouch walking from here to this location and then doing the sneak attack. But this is what we have from the actual animation pack. However, from Lyra, we do have this crouch walk animation. So it would be good if we could just combine this with this, so that starts off and then it ends up here. So we might need to use some techniques that we learned in previous videos on root motion animations. So this is the original animation from the Lyra starter pack. We just open that, go to Asset Details, and we can see, so it has root motion on it, which we'll need to probably enable. And we can use this as our starting and then attach the attack to the end of it. So let's try doing that. So let's create a level sequence. So let's first of all just put our tutorial, our sneak character here. Then let's add a level sequence. Let's call that LS crouch attack. Put that in tutorial, save, and open it. First thing we'll do is we'll add our sneak character. Then we will click and add an animation, which should be our crouch walk forward animation. So if we play that, he will move forward. We probably only need maybe half of this animation for it to work, so maybe at about 30 frames we can right click, edit, and trim section, keeps the left. So we keep the left, so just half of that. This will be the root motion. So using this, it should be able to extend or to contract how far the character moves when we are warping. To the end of this, we now want to add our attack. So we'll say add animation, and we'll say attack. What was it called? Paired sneak attack retargeted. So that will come there. And what we need to do, like we've done in previous videos, is probably go to the front of the first one, right click, say properties, and force custom mode. Then at the start of the next sequence, and I think you can just click on selection here, go down and say force custom mode on both of them. And then we need to match the bones. So right click again there, say match with this bone in previous clip, we'll say foot left. So let's see what happens. Does he carry on? Yep. So instead of snapping back, he now carries on with that animation. There's a bit of a snap there. I think what we'll need to do is maybe just blend it, so we can grab this, maybe move it across a bit. And now what happens? So I've ended up with this kind of animation. So I've done previous videos on how to do this, so I won't go into too much depth. But basically, you're trying to, sometimes you can show the skeletons, which makes it easier to align everything. You want the two to align at this position, and I've on here on the properties, I've changed the start location offset just so that the two skeletons do align. And I've on the blend, so you can choose how much to blend, I've just changed the curve to an exponential in-out curve. So once we've done that, we should be able to export and the other thing I've done is I've just moved the start and finished parts of the animation in by 1 or 2 frames, so we don't get the first frame on it. And once you've done that, you can right click here, say bake animation sequence. We can put that in our tutorial, and maybe we can just call that crouch, sneak, attack, sequence, and save that. On the save, I'm going to turn off export morph targets but leave everything else as default. Close that. We should be able to go see our animation, so crouch, attack, sneak. We open that. So once we open that, we can play it, see what it looks like. So we've got some good root motions. Now the root motion window that we've got available is far more than it was originally. So we've got all of this root motion to work with, as opposed to just that little amount that we had to begin with. So that should make it easier for the motion warping. For animation, let's do the motion warping. So if we go back to our content browser, and we create a montage from that new animation we've created. And in montage, we can open that montage, so that will play like this. And now we need to identify the frames that will make up the motion warping, where the root motion is. So we could say all of these frames would be good for root motion. Basically, whenever the root is moving, we should have root motion. If you're getting this kind of a strange effect on your animation, like I am, what I might do is I might go to the animation, let me just duplicate it, open it, maybe move it 1 frame, say remove frames 0 to 1, save it, then go back to that, go back there with this new one I've created, and create an animation montage from this. And that should get rid of that strange effect that we were seeing. So what we need to do now is now add our motion warping. So go to Notify. On your first track, right click, say Add Notify, Notify State, and we want this motion warping. So that will add the motion warping state. we now need to define how big we want it to be. So we can probably start it all the way right from the start of the animation, I think. So click left from the start, and if you hold down Shift and then hold on this one here on the right side, you can now extend it to how far you want the motion warping window to last. So we want to capture all the actual motion warping movement. So I'd say about there. So that will be our motion warping window. And then we want the normal animation to start. We might need to play about with this window, but we'll carry on for the moment. Now if you click on the motion warping, and on the right in the details, there should be a config. And here we can choose what type of motion warping we want. So we want skew warp. Skew warp will do both the location and the rotation, which is what we want. We need to give it a warp target name. So we can just say that's the choke warp target. The rest of this we don't need to change. We want to warp translation. We want to ignore the Z-axis. We can leave the mode. We want it to warp rotation because it needs to turn to face the correct angle. The rotation type we'll leave as default. So the character rotates to match the rotation of the point, or there is facing, he rotates to face. We'll keep it at default. The method we can leave as it is, and the warp rotation time. So this defines how long it takes to rotate into the right alignment. We'll just leave that as 1, so we'll take the entire warp window to face the right direction. If you wanted that to be faster or slower, you can change this value here and just read the pop-up. So we can save everything here. That's saved OK. Now let's go back to our sneak character. So to use motion warping on your character, you need to add the motion warping component. That gives us the motion warping component. We don't need to change anything here. So the way that our takedown is going to work is that our character has to approach the victim from behind while the character is in a crouched position. So that means that this character needs to have a crouch animation in its blueprint and perhaps some kind of trace to detect where the victim is, and only when he detects the victim and is at a certain distance from the victim can he activate the crouch the sneak attack animation. So the first thing we'll need to do is go to our character, find his animation blueprint because there is no crouch built into it. The mesh blueprint is Manny. Let's find the blueprint. What we will do is we'll take this Manny blueprint, we'll copy it to our tutorial, then we will change the skeleton on this. So we will say assign skeleton. Ours is from the Lyra, so we'll use the Lyra skeleton. Accept all that. We'll just rename this then ABP Sneak. We'll also need to create a blend space for our crouch animations. So animation, blend space. Again, I've called mine Lyra. BS crouch locomotion. You can open that. The horizontal axis will be speed from 0 to 350. Give maybe 16 grids. Snap to grid. The vertical will just snap. And then we will put the idle at 0 and the crouch walk forward here. And on the crouch walk forward, we'll just need to make sure that it is enable root motion, force root lock. So that's our blend space that's working there. We can open our blueprint, go to the anim graph. So we've got a locomotion state machine. We'll create a crouch state machine called crouch loco. We'll cache that. So crouch cache. Here we will create a state, idle. Put that there. Create another state, crouch loco. In this we can put our crouch loco blend space that we created. I think there's already the blueprint already comes with velocity or ground speed. Let's use ground speed. That will go in there. Then we'll need to create some transitions. So from idle to moving, so this should move, which is already in the blueprint, we can use that if that's true. And to go the other way, we can say should move is not true, so a not boolean. That does that. So we've got the crouch cache coming here. We've got the default slot, so we want to do a blend before the slot. So blend by bool, blend by bool. And the value that we want to do it on whether the character is crouching or not. So if he's not crouching, it can be false. If he is crouching, we want the crouch cache to come through. Crouch cache. And the value here we can get from a property access, I think. Property access. We already have our character somehow referenced, so we can say go down to character and look for is crouched. B is crouched. So if it is crouched, it will do the crouch cache. If it isn't, it will do the main cache. Maybe give it a bit of a blend there. 0.5, 0.5. And that can then go into the default slot. So that should be our blueprint. Just go to our character and change that to ABP sneak, and that should work just fine. We want to be able to crouch, so we'll need to set crouching, I think, on the character movement. So can crouch, you need to tick this or it won't work. And then maybe we can just use a key to crouch. So we can say maybe C is crouch. So debug key. So that will trigger crouching for us on and off. So when we press it, we could do a flip-flop. We can say just crouched, I think, isn't it? Crouch. and the second time we say uncrouch. So if we test that to make sure it's working, blueprint locomotion, press C, crouches, uncrouches. We can maybe change the camera, just give that a bit of a lag, I think. Enable camera lag. So that's smoother. The next thing we need to do is a trace to find our victim. So let's just compile that. And we can do this as a function, I think. So we'll create a function. We'll say trace for victim. We'll do a sphere trace, I think. Sphere trace by channel. So the start will be, we'll get our eyes. So get eyes, get the actor's eyes viewpoint. That will be the start. The end will be, we need to get the actor forward vector. We'll multiply that by a distance to float. We could say maybe 4 meters, 400. Then we can add these two together. That will be the end. We'll give it a radius of maybe 20. The visibility would be camera because it's a character. The actors to ignore should just be ourselves, and we could do for 1 frame. So this should then tell us whether we're hitting a victim or not. So we can branch on that. We can break this. And if we are hitting, then that should give us the hit actor. From the hit actor, we need to get this attacking transform. Or we need to send the instruction to trigger the attack to the victim, which might be easier. Because we'll need one of the actors to coordinate and synchronize the two animations. So we'll let the victim be the one that does that. Instead of casting, we'll create an interface. So blueprint interface, call that BPI warp. And this will be the maybe trigger attack. In this we'll need to send a reference to the attacker and the montage it has to play. So this could be the attacker, which we'll send as a character, and another input will be the montage, attack montage. So that will be an anim montage, I think. Yep. So those two information, I think minimum we'll need to send. We can then go to our victim, and in the class settings we can give it the interface. So that will be BPI warp. And that will then open up the trigger attack event. In our sneak character, if we are triggering the event, we'll create a separate event to deal with that. So we'll say custom event trigger attack on victim. We'll need to have a reference to that actor, or this will be the victim, which will be an actor. Object reference. And then on this we can call from the BPI trigger attack. The attacker would be ourself, and our montage is the one sneak attack montage. We will want to define conditions for when this attack can be triggered. So let's just create a function which we'll need in the future. So can sneak attack. We'll need a return node. We'll need a parameter can sneak attack, and we only want to sneak attack if we're not sneak attacking, so let's just create a variable b is sneak attacking. That will be false by default, so we'll say b is sneak attacking is false, so that's not true. We can sneak attack. We'll probably want to have more than just one condition, so let's just set up a boolean. We'll tick that for true at the moment, and we can attach further ones later on. So if we're not attacking, we can sneak attack is where it stands at the moment, and we can make this a pure function. Go back to our event graph. We can maybe branch on this. And we can get our function can sneak attack. If we can sneak attack, we want to set b is sneak attacking to true, so we don't keep calling the same function again. So that will then trigger the interface, which will come through to the victim. And that will be the event trigger attack, where we get the attacker. So again, here we want to have a variable to see if we're being attacked. So b is being attacked. That will be false by default, so we can branch on that. So it is being attacked, and if that is false, we can do the attacks, but we just need to set that to being true. Now we've got this attacker and montage. We can promote these to variables just in case we need them later on. So that could be our attacker, and promote this to a variable. This will be our attacker's montage. And we can connect everything up here. So now if we're not attacking, we'll want to, on our attacker, we want to play his montage, attack montage. So play, and in montage we want to have the one with the async, so we'll say get mesh, and then play montage. And we have a montage here to play. Before we can do this though, what we need to do is we need to set the warp target for the motion warping to work. To do that, we'll need to get hold of the motion warping component. So we could just send that through on the trigger attack maybe. So we could say input motion warp component, and that would be a motion warping component object reference. You can compile that. Then in our character we can send our motion warping component which we added. In our victim we now have the motion warping component here, so we could just promote that to a variable. So I've just added a sequence node there and set up our references to the motion warping component. So after we've set his being attacked, we've got our attacker, his mesh, his montage. We need to set the motion warp target update. So that's our component. We can get that. Now we can say add motion, add or update warp target. So this is the one that we need. This warp target is a structure, so we can make it. It needs a name, so in our montage we gave the warp target a name which we called choke. So this is the warp target that it will be looking for. It then needs a location, a rotation, and any other data we need. We've got this attacking transform, so this is basically the attacking warp target transform. So we can get that. We can get the transform, get the world transform. We can maybe break that, split it, and put the location in there. The rotation will be 0, but we can still add it. The component, scene component, I don't think we need to set any of these because we're just using a simple warp target with a name and a location and rotation. So we can move all this across, plug this in here, and then we can play the montage. So let's see if we can actually warp to this correct location. Let's go back to our sneak character. So in our trace for victim, if it is true, we want to call trigger attack on victim. This should be our victim that we're looking for. Compile that. We want to be crouching, isn't it? So actually we've said is sneak attacking. We can also maybe put is crouched. So get is crouched from the character. So both of those should be true. Then in the event that should trigger this, which should hopefully trigger the animation. We will need to get the tick function to run the trace. So we'll get the tick function, and then we'll say do trace for victim. So that will run that on tick. So if we go back to our main scene, this is the player start here, and this is our victim. If we press play, so we can see the trace happening, we need to be crouched. Now let's see if we hit the victim. So we move there. Yep, so we're moving into the right location, but we're snapping back. So the snap back is probably because we haven't enabled root motion. So if we go to our sneak attack that we created in the sequencer and just go and enable root motion and save that, we should take care of one of those problems there. So we crouch, we approach from behind, motion warps to the right location. He's not getting there completely though, is he? And part of that issue might be because there is going to be some collision taking place. So there is a collision on the victim. So we'll need to turn that off when we do is being attacked. What we could do is we could take this and turn this into a function and say attack started. We can open that. So one we set is being attacked to true. The other thing we'll need to do is, I think from the capsule, or we can just say set collision enabled capsule component, put that to no collision. So now we shouldn't get blocked moving towards the character. So that will be attack started. Let's see if that gets us closer. So we crouch, we come from behind, we trigger. So we're getting closer but not close enough. The issue here is probably to do with our motion warp window. So if you go to our montage again, this is probably not capturing enough of the motion warping. So if we just click on that, shift click, maybe bring it a bit more, say to 29 frames, so we get more of this root motion captured here before it switches. Save, let's play again, crouch. Now that's better there, isn't it? So now it's reaching. Play again. Yep, so that's better. So that's part of the problem though. You need to make sure that you're getting a bit of trial and error and making sure you're capturing all the root motion in the first part, so it gets to the correct choke point and then has its own sneak attack root motion to take it to the victim's neck. We now need to synchronize the actual victim animation as well. So we could just delay it, says 0.98 seconds, or what might be better is if we just put a notify on here. So add a notify track at this location. So just when he reaches that choke point, we can say add a notify, a montage notify. We can just call that, so just trigger choke, and we can save that. So when it reaches here, it will issue a notify. We go back to our victim. That means that when we play our montage here, we'll get a notify begin that comes through, and then we can play the montage on our victim. So we can say play montage, and I think I've just gone and made sure we've got a montage for these. So the Ramster, I've just created a montage for the paired sneak break. So I think it's that one we want. Paired sneak break victim. Right, the victim, maybe try this one on the notify begin. So we can try that out now. Let's have a look. Let's play. Crouch. Come across. And we play the two animations. Seem pretty well. Do that again. And there we have it. We don't want our victim to get back up, so we want to turn him into a ragdoll at the end. So if we go to his neck break montage, we can probably sort of say around when he hits the ground, around here, maybe we just want to turn him into a ragdoll. So we could maybe add a notify, again a montage notify. Maybe just give that a name if we want to. ragdoll. Then back in our victim, we should get that notify on his montage. So here we could say, we can get the mesh, tell it to set simulate physics to true, and set collision profile to, I think it's just called ragdoll. And notify begin. So back in the editor we can now play. We crouch, we come close, neck break, and he ragdolls onto the ground. So that's a basic how you do motion warping to create paired animation sequences. And the key was using this. From the motion warp component we add the warp target. I think there's another node here, actually an easier one. Add warp. Well, there is just an add transform, so we could have actually just used this, and then from here just got the transform. Put that in, give it the choke, and it would work essentially the same instead of needing this big node that we've used there. Yep. There are a few issues that we need to solve. So one is the angle at which we can attack. So at the moment we can attack from almost any angle, which we want to restrict so we are in a cone behind the actual victim. And the other is that we can only attack one of them because we need to reset the sneak attack. The third is that we perhaps want to allow the player to decide whether to attack or not by pressing a key when they meet the other criteria. So we'll need a widget for that. So those are a few things we need to solve. We will do this and adding any camera animation sequences in the next parts.